For many energy saving projects, retrofitting lighting systems may be a good option. But to determine whether it is a good option, some quantitative analysis is helpful to determine how much money would be saved. So the Universal Translator has a module for this, which is called the light load model. And what happens is you can take sensors on site that measure the lighting levels, and you can put an occupancy sensor into a space and thereby look at the actual patterns that occur during the day and figure out how much you would save if you added a control logic to the lighting system, meaning usually lighting relay panels or something of that nature. So in the sample data that comes with the UT, which installs in Program Files, UT Online, the sample data folder, there's a light load directory. We'll take both of those text files and simply drag and drop them over into the UT. You have to scroll up a little. I'll do that again. And with those two imported, let's make a chart that takes a quick look at what actually happens in the data. Just drag that in there. One of the two, the restroom occupancy sensor voltage, is a little bit too low on this scale, so I'm going to put it on a separate pane. So in the chart, there's a separate video on how to do this as well, by the way. I'm going to make a new pane. Here's the second one, and then I'm going to take the occupancy sensor and put it on that second pane. So here's the lighting level. This is in lumens per square foot, and here is the voltage output from the occupancy sensor. So in the existing data, we can see there's some movement here, and obviously movement here. This occurs at about 9 o'clock at night. So this appears to be the cleaning crew that goes through, and this is a restroom. So around 9 o'clock through 9:45, there's cleaning going on. So now, one other thing, by the way, here's the scale, which on the bottom pane looks like just a 1. So we'll change that. The reason it's just a 1 is because there's no decimals. And so we're going to just reconfigure the scaling of this by going into the pane collection. I'm going to look at the y-axis collection of the lower pane and make that a single decimal point instead of 0. So I'll change that to a 1. Okay, there we go. So the trigger level for this occupancy sensor, if I were to set that at, say, around about half or so, it would trigger occupancy here and turn on the lights if I had a control system that was activated. And clearly, that's roughly around the level that I do want to set it. I can see movement here, and so roughly around the 0.5, 0.6 mark is where that is triggered. In real life, I would want to make sure that I do some testing first with the occupancy sensor, because they do tend to be quite sensitive, and depending on how they're configured, I could get false readings from someone walking through a corridor as far as 20 feet away that triggers the occupancy sensor. Obviously, I wouldn't want that to then turn on the lights in the bathroom all the time. That's a little bit of field calibration that has to be done to get an understanding of how exactly this sensor is configured. But let's say we triggered this at about half a volt, and that would turn on the lights. How would that react in terms of energy savings if I were to actually connect that to a control system? So let's start a analysis here. I'll start a new one, new light load analysis. I'll open it up by double clicking, and I can use either a time schedule or the occupancy sensor. I do have an occupancy sensor, so I'm going to use that. I'll select the root channel folder here because I only have these two channels in here, so that's it. That's my whole model. For the occupancy channel, I'm going to take the occupancy sensor voltage. For the device, I'm going to take the light intensity as a proxy for the light bulb being on or off. And I'm going to say if it's above, let's say it's above 200 lumens, I'm going to call it on. So here's my threshold. Let's say this is a 100-watt light bulb. And as we said earlier, the actual trigger level for this, if I'm assuming that people were actually moving around here and the light was on, I'm going to say the trigger level, if I set it up correctly, would be somewhere around 0.5, for example. And then I can analyze it and see if I were to actually connect that occupancy sensor to a lighting control system, how would my energy picture look? And it turns out I would be saving quite a bit of money because, for instance, in this area where I see blue, this is a potential savings, meaning had I connected the occupancy sensor, it would have kept the lights off. And that's because when I go back to the chart, in here, my trigger level is below 0.5. So I'm going to interpret this as saying in a real condition, there would have been some movement detected by the occupancy sensor, but it wouldn't have been enough to say there's actually someone in the space. Sort of just, surrounding noise. So it would have kept the lights off, and therefore I would have saved this peak here where the lights are on. I would have not had the lights on. Or over here on the left, I actually end up triggering the occupancy sensor twice, but in between it doesn't trigger. So these are these two peaks. It's as if somebody walked in, walked back out, walked back in. And so I would have saved these areas here. I can play a little bit with the results, but essentially what this says is I would have significant savings if I did that, and a potential waste would occur only here, meaning if I had a control system, it would have kept the lights on, even though in reality, for my current system without lighting controls, they were off. And this occurs at the time when the cleaning crew is in here. So there is some movement still being detected by the occupancy sensor, but the cleaning crew, I guess, manually turned the lights off already. And in this case, our control system would have kept the lights on, but that potential waste is far outweighed by the savings. So had I installed this, I would see savings. And I can change the settings a little bit. For example, if I had the timer on less than 15 minutes, that probably wouldn't work very well in an office, because in an office, if the lights shut off every 5 minutes, clearly people get upset about that. But in a bathroom, you wouldn't be in there for all that long. So if the lights turned off in there more quickly, that might be acceptable. So with the current settings, my savings end up being for this one light bulb about 182 kWh hours per year, or $22, based on the existing pattern, which is just 1 day's worth of operation. You might want to look at more days of operation. But if I took this turn off time down to 5 minutes instead of 15 minutes, then I would find that the savings would probably increase. So I'll go back to this chart, and the results here, $21 at the moment per year for that one light bulb. I analyze it again with 5 minutes. Now these grew slightly bigger. These bars grew slightly bigger because, of course, the light turns off much more quickly when the occupancy sensor is not triggered, and I would save $30. So that's almost a 50% increase. So depending on how I want to set these up, I can play a little bit with what my payback would be if I was going to install a lighting control system.